Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Mayor Sherry Cantor, and I want to welcome you to West Hartford to celebrate, commemorate, and acknowledge the importance of Juneteenth, June 19th, when in Texas the last notice of freedom of slavery reached. Again, Texas 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865. We are, I'm a little embarrassed that this is the first time that we've done this. And I want this to make sure that this is an ongoing tradition and we all come together and give this day a lot of thought. And we're thinking how powerfully this particular Juneteenth is in light of the violence, the police violence and brutality that we've seen, the injustices that we've seen, the inequities that we've seen through COVID-19, really truly the health crisis that we've seen with people of color, especially Black Americans. And we want to make sure that we are in a place that we don't never go back, that we're constantly moving forward. As I heard somebody say this morning, from the Urban League, this is the start of the start, right? So we need to keep doing the work. And I am so happy to see so many new faces. And we are going to need all of you to make our communities better, to truly fulfill the social contract of leaving no one behind. That is essential work that we all have to do together. So I'm thanking you in advance of the tremendous work we have ahead of us. I am going to, oh no, what happened to my, I lost my quote. I must have deleted it by accident while I was talking. I'm so sorry. I lost my quote. Anyway, I just wanted to say again, thank you all for being here, and I'm going to introduce you to State Representative Tammy Exum.
Good morning and happy Juneteenth. Can you say happy Juneteenth? This is a moment of jubilation. And I'm so happy to see so many of you come out this morning. And what I have been charged to do is to tell you a little bit about the history. And that's really important, but I found something that was pretty short but comprehensive that I would like to share with you. And it is by Jamila Nasheed. So what is Juneteenth, and why is it celebrated, and why does it matter? June 19th marks a special celebration for communities around the United States. Celebrated as Juneteenth, a combination of June and 19th. The holiday recognizes when the United States ended its historic practice of slavery legally and in the real world. In this sense, Juneteenth is a day for commemorating the freedom of all people living in the United States. Whether you grew up celebrating Juneteenth or have never heard of it, here's what you need to know about the holiday and how it came to be and why it matters to so many people. So how did Juneteenth get started? President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. It was intended, many were told, to free all slaves. But in August 1862, President Lincoln wrote an open letter to Horace Greeley, the editor of the New York Tribune, in which he described his actions as an intent to preserve the Union rather than to abolish slavery. Quote, "My paramount object in the struggle is to save the Union, and it is not either to save or destroy slavery," Lincoln wrote. "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save the Union." Famous for his honesty, Lincoln clearly viewed his decree as more of a political tool than a means of liberation. Its impact bears that out. Lincoln's 1863 Emancipation Proclamation declared, quote, that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are, and henceforth shall be free. This means that the proclamation only applied to states that had seceded from the United States, leaving slavery intact in border states and southern states under northern control. In addition, the promise of the abolishment of slavery was contingent on the Union Army winning the Civil War, which didn't happen until April 1865. But even after that, the Union had to force emancipation. In Texas, approximately 250,000 people were still being held in slavery when, on June 19, 1865, Union troops led by Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston to announce that the war had ended and that all slaves were now free. Granger delivered General Order Number 3, which said, quote, the people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that of employer and hired labor. Although slavery wouldn't legally end in all states until December 1865, ratification of the 13th Amendment, June 19th, which became known as Juneteenth, was the day when the last American slaves were freed, resulting in massive celebrations. So why do we celebrate Juneteenth? In 1866, the year after Granger's order, the first Juneteenth anniversary celebration happened. Since then, celebrations in certain regions of the United States have continued the tradition of honoring this important day. In 1872, a group of former slaves put together $800 and purchased 10 acres of land in Houston, Texas, for the city's annual Juneteenth celebrations. And they named the space Emancipation Park, where Juneteenth celebrations are held even now. Year after year since, small pockets of the United States have erupted in celebration of the day when everybody in the United States was declared free, while the day has gone largely unnoticed in the majority of the country. In 1980, Texas became the first state to make Juneteenth a state holiday, and as of today, 45 states and Washington, D.C. recognize the day as a state holiday. Despite the continuous efforts of various activists, Juneteenth has not become a national holiday. But despite the lack of federal recognition, the holiday has lived on with rich traditions, including lively celebrations in the forms of festivals and parades, local bands playing, picnics, storytelling, and the Juneteenth staple, barbecues. Traditionally, red drinks and red foods are a must at these barbecues, which symbolize resilience. Thus, we're wearing red today. I just wanted to give you a brief history lesson. Very important to understand it. This is why we really need to teach our history, so that you can be aware of this and its importance. And so now, with that in mind, I would like to introduce Rosina Haskins. She's the Director of Diversity Advancement with West Hartford Public Schools.
Thank you for that rich history, State Rep. Excellent. So, I am so humbled on this significant Juneteenth day. Juneteenth is the commemoration of American freedom, but it also emphasizes education and achievement. So I am honored that I have been invited today to speak on behalf of the Witness Stones Project of West Hartford, on behalf of our educators and our students. But first, let me share that Witness Stones is modeled after the stumbling stones of Germany to commemorate the lives lost in the Holocaust. Witness Stones West Hartford was introduced in 2018 around one central and compelling question: why bear witness to slavery in West Hartford? Well, it may seem obvious to many that Black history is American history. Black history is U.S. history. Black history is us, too. But for those who endured the misrepresentation, the miseducation of the African American experience, it may not be as obvious. And so the Witness Stones Project provides an opportunity for our students to transform themselves into young historians. They access church records and wills and account bills and other primary sources to conduct their research on the lives of African descendants who were enslaved right here in West Hartford, right here on the land that we're standing on today. Our students then, our scholars, they then present their research in a collection of narratives, creative expression, art, essays, poetry. And then the project culminates just down the road at Old Center Cemetery with an installation of stones placed for the African men and women who were enslaved right here in West Hartford. Now, the project compels both our students and our educators to really uncover the truth of American history, the oppression, the dehumanization of our African descendants, but more importantly, it allows all of us to bear witness to the American strength, resilience, beauty, and contributions to the economic, socioeconomic, and political American system. And so the curriculum does teach hard history, and it's supported with professional development, but it empowers our students to be active agents of change. As I wrap up, I do want to, this day, this commemoration isn't about a single person of the past or any group of people today in our present. But I do want to give a polite and respectful nod to you, Adrienne Billings Smith, because she made this happen. Because 2 weeks ago, we were total strangers and our paths intersected, and it's no coincidence. And I am struck by how firmly she stands on the principles of emancipation for our ancestors, and the human rights for all Black lives. And so, it's a reminder to me that no one should ever have to shrink their identity or who they are to make someone else comfortable. And that's the teaching hard history part. So I want to invite you, we have to be better about building each other up. We have to be better about coming forward in collective will, showing up in collective will. And until we do, and when we do, then we will truly lift the legacy of the men and women that we came here today to honor and to free posthumously from their bonds of enslavement. Thank you for allowing me to speak here today. I now have the privilege of introducing graduating Conard Senior, high school senior, Ishay Griffith.
It took my 12th year of school for me to sit in a classroom and receive a formal education about Black history, not to mention that taking the class was a choice. Although I knew the information of the class like the back of my hand, it was cool to see that people like me were the main focus. Fortunately for me, I grew up learning my true history from my mother and other people that made my village. I learned about Mansa Musa, Nefertiti, King Tut, and other aspects that that didn't revolve around the agenda that Blacks were only victims of slavery and persecution. However, many students unfortunately didn't have either this at school or at home. I believe that it is important for students to learn the history I learned of the African kings and queens that I looked up to, and to learn it at a young age. Because while my mother made it her duty to keep me educated, many children will never have that. It shouldn't take 12 school years for a child to learn their history, because Black history is American history. And so if they don't teach it at all, you are failing to do your job. Incorporate it into classrooms, read books, buy posters, do what needs to be done. This commemoration provides a platform for people to understand why this day is important and how hard we must work moving on. Being around people from all walks of life, I hope that you take away the importance of Juneteenth. We are in another wave of revolution, and this event right here, right now, emphasizes why we need to come together. There is no Independence Day without Black history. In order to celebrate the 4th of July, you must first recognize and honor the 19th of June. That's it. Thank you. Up next is Mr. Earl Exum, which is the president of WASCO.
Good morning. As Ishay indicated, I'm Earl Exum. I'm the president of the West Hartford African American Social and Cultural Organization, which has been active in West Hartford since the 1970s. To start off, there's Rosina talked about the Witness Stone Project, and I just wanted to recognize we have Tracy Wilson somewhere way in the back. She's trying to be protected here. And she sent me a text this morning knowing that she had to stay way in the back to be protected from the virus. But she wanted to thank everyone for the leadership in making this celebration and proclamation happen, and how proud she is that we're actually celebrating Juneteenth today. Tracy Wilson taught my son U.S. history from the African American perspective, which I think is the course that Ishay was referencing. And she introduced me to one of my favorite history books called These Truths by Jill Lepore. And she introduced this to me after she and I were discussing agency of enslaved people and African American people. In the book, you'll learn of thousands of enslaved people that escaped slavery, of free African American people that risked their lives in order to operate the Underground Railroad, of African American abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, the most photographed man in America at the time, who stood up for equality and dignity of African American people and had tremendous influence on leaders like Abraham Lincoln, who, as Tammy alluded to, had to evolve to his more egalitarian view of African American people and freedom. You'll learn of countless slave rebellions. There's even one in the Caribbean that one could actually attribute the fact that we were successful in the American Revolution. People don't know this. In the Caribbean, people of African descent outnumbered people who were white. So when they had a rebellion, it was very difficult to put down. So Britain actually had to send troops during the American Revolution, had to send them to the Caribbean, because the Caribbean was extremely lucrative. I mean, sugar was probably more lucrative than cotton. So because of that, Britain kind of said, well, let's forget about those colonies. Let's go protect, our real assets down in the Caribbean. But that was because of people of African descent who weren't content in their condition as being enslaved. There's one story about slaves that were in Georgia that escaped slavery. They traveled down through Georgia to Florida, combined forces with Native Americans, and took over a Spanish fort. We had African Americans that fought courageously in the Civil War in order to fight against Southern oppression. Now let's bring this agency to West Hartford. We know that when the Witness Stone Project and in the research, we know that at least 2 of the enslaved people either escaped or attempted to escape. We know of one, Bristow, who purchased his own slavery. And Bristow is whom our middle school is named after. And I want to give credit to many people, including a Wasco member named Booker Devon, who did the research on Bristow and advocated for the naming of the middle school. Bristow bought his freedom and was a very industrious person. These people weren't content in the enslaved condition, and the fact that they were not able to really fulfill all their industriousness. But today on Juneteenth, it's a day to remember those people, not for their enslavement, but for their humanity, their resilience, their dignity that shouldn't be hidden by their enslaved condition. And now I want to introduce Adrienne Billings Smith.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adrienne Billings Smith. I am the founder of Concerned Parents of Color of West Hartford, a newly founded organization. And I would like to take a moment and thank Mayor Cantor and for recognizing the importance and significance of Juneteenth. I'd also like to specifically thank Councilman Sweeney for getting this together so quickly. I'd also like to recognize our other community and state leaders that are here today, but most importantly, all of you. As I sit here on this land donated by a slave owner, I stand here proudly recognizing the lives of our ancestors. As a Black queer woman standing on the very land that was touched by the blood, sweat, and tears of my ancestors, this moment is not lost on me. I think about the love I have for my country, because love is the only emotion that will allow you to endure atrocities that have been committed and wake up the next day and try again. We as a country have done so much, but there is still an immense amount of work to be done to forever free our country from its own bondage. On January 1st of 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was enacted. To paraphrase President Lincoln, all persons held as slaves with any state or designated part of a state shall henceforward and forever be free. He goes on to say, and by the virtue and the power and for the purpose aforesaid, I do order and declare that all persons held as slaves are forever henceforward shall be free. Now, no matter what his intent was in that moment, he freed slaves not only in the Confederacy, but also he freed those bodies of our ancestors that had been laid to rest on their master's land, still being watched over by their oppressor. They were granted freedom in that very moment, and the chains of bondage were forever broken for them. From that day forward, the individuals who fought and died for us, and the individuals who died at the hand of their oppressors, were granted their freedom. And this was solidified by the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. So from now on, we give our ancestors the respect they are owed. Without their resilience, without their love, without their beaten bodies and broken spirits, we would not be standing here on this land paying our respects to them today. Let me say again that though this day marks the day in 1865 that our last ancestors were informed of their freedom from slavery, we still have to recognize that the African American experience has been far from the feeling of freedom, and there's much work to be done to ensure that we hold our country to its promises of life, liberty, and happiness, and freedom and justice for all. Thank you all. I would like to introduce Councilwoman Carol Blanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming out and being with us this morning to celebrate such a huge occasion. And it warms my heart to see how everyone came together this morning, early in the morning, to show up. And as Adrienne and Earl and Representative Exum stated, this was put together in a short period of time. So imagine what we can do when we all come together and we plan not only this event, but so many others to address this issue that for far too long has gone on unaddressed. Now, before I read this proclamation, I do want to acknowledge a bunch of our other elected officials here, because behind the scenes and putting in the long hours, these are the folks that do the hard work to allow us to have the many benefits that we enjoy. So I want to acknowledge my other council members that are here. I know I saw Councilman Ben Winograd, Councilwoman Beth Kerrigan, Councilman Leon Davidoff, Councilman Chris Williams, Councilwoman Mary Fay, and former and past Councilwoman Judy Casperson. And I don't know if Representative Berengia is here, but I want to acknowledge him as well. I hope I didn't miss anybody. And I also, I did miss somebody. And I also want to acknowledge my Vice Chair, Lorna Thomas Ferguson, who will follow me, and also Board Member Amanda Aronson, and Board Member Ari Steinberg, and I hope I didn't miss anybody else. All right, I'm going to start, and I'm going to read this proclamation. I also can't forget our town staff, because they do all the hard work and the heavy lifting. Yeah. The Town of West Hartford Proclamation. Whereas the Town of West Hartford embraces the foundation of its diversity and recognition of the individuals once enslaved in this town, to be on full display on this June 19th, 2020, known as Juneteenth, which marks the day in 1865 that the last enslaved people of our country were informed of their freedom after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. Whereas we affirm their freedom from the chains of invisibility and bondage, and forever recognize their agency, human rights, and contribution to our town, and fully condemn the actions of those individuals who chose to enslave other human beings. Whereas the hard work and countless hours of work of the Witness Stone's West Hartford project, initiated in 2018 under the auspices of the Noah Webster House and the many students and community members of West Hartford who have dedicated their time and help tell the individual stories of 23 enslaved people, including the story of Bristow. Whereas the Town of West Hartford formally apologizes to the descendants of the individuals, many of whom died without the title of a free person they so richly deserved, and fully acknowledge, respect, and recognize their agency as free human beings, and further recognized through the intentions of the Emancipation Proclamation. Whereas the town of West Hartford is forever indebted to the individuals listed below and recognizes that its foundation was built by the individuals that have been identified and many others who died with their names yet to be discovered. And here is where I'm going to pause, and I'm going to turn this over to our Vice Chair of our West Hartford Board of Education, Dr. Lorna Thomas Ferguson.
Good morning. It is so good to be before you today for this day of celebration. And yes, it has been shared that this came together with valiant efforts in a short period of time. However, don't be mistaken. This has been long in the waiting. This is something that is long overdue, and today is the day where West Hartford is finally recognizing those that have been enslaved, and that is something all of us should celebrate. We have the beginning of a proclamation that was read, and it paused right before identifying those persons who were enslaved here and those names that were not recognized. Names. Well, what's the significance of names? Because this proclamation includes all of those names so far that have been discovered. Why is that meaningful? Someone's name is a strong sense of who a person is. Someone's name gives a person a sense of identity, a sense of purpose. Someone's name gives a sense of lineage, of contribution. And what we do know is that those individuals who are enslaved in this town were not recognized by name. The research that has been done to unveil who they are first meant having to go through a list of assets that those who enslaved them had in terms of their property. When persons passed on, when their assets were passed on to those after them, those persons who were enslaved were not named as staff, were not named as part of the family. They were named among a list of other items such as 2 horses, a mule, a dog, a cow, and my slave boy or slave girl so-and-so and so-and-so. A name. A name says so much. And intentionally, many enslaved individuals were not recognized by name. Why? That was done as a way of taking away who they are, taking away their presence. It was done intentionally. We will do that no more. So as we continue with the reading of this proclamation, I encourage all of you to attentively listen to each and every name that is mentioned, because each and every name recognizes a person who contributed to what this town was, but more importantly, what this town has become. Simone, Caesar, lied. Paige, Ben, Dinah, Hannah, Kofi, Sarah Coffey, Peter, Pompey, Jack, Sind, Ned, Ben, Reuben, Prout, Boy Jack, Chris Greenville, Kate, Lou, Caesar, Child of Lou, Jude, Prime, also Prince, Amboy, Bristow, George, Frank, London, Mila Mary, Lil, Peg's child, widow of Jude, Lemon, Nelson, Tony, Harvey, William Amos Wright, Aaron, Peleg Knott, John Anderson, and the 17 men, women, and children whose names have yet been identified.
Now therefore, be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby recognize and commemorate Juneteenth in the town of West Hartford and remember the enslaved individuals of this town, as well as those who were last informed of their freedom on June 19th, 1865. I just want to thank again. Sometimes it takes a little spark to get something going. Adrienne Billings Smith was our spark. But we couldn't have put this together and have the substance and the background information and the understanding without the work of the Witness Stone Project and all of the work actually of Wasco and so many people that have helped to lift us up to bring us to a point where we really can start doing the work, right? This is the start of the start. And I want to end with one thing, with hold these things that tell your history and protect them. During slavery, who was able to read or write or keep anything, or to keep anything at all, any record? The ability to have somebody to tell your story is so important. It says, I was here. I may be sold tomorrow, but you know I was here. That was Maya Angelou. Juneteenth celebrations serve as a reminder that until everyone is free, no one is free. I want to thank our Public Works Department, our town staff, town manager, again, all our elected officials here. Thank you all. The work begins now. Let's go. Thank you.